Can you learn a language while you sleep? There's a reason people ask this. Imagine you could go to sleep in some special way, and when you wake up, you speak a new language. Sure, maybe you'll need to follow some sleep regimen and it won't happen overnight, at least over one night. But imagine learning Spanish while you slumber, Russian while you rest, Dutch while you dream. I could do this all day, but most of you aren't here to see how many sleep language puns I can make, so I'll stop myself at Norwegian while you nod. Okay, I'm done. Tagalog while you saw logs. Okay, I'm really done this time. I don't know about you, but I would do that. It's like downloading a new skill from the Matrix. But we all know we don't live in a computer simulation where you can just download new skills. Still, this idea is tantalizing, and since I'm older than AOL,
You've got mail.
I remember hearing people talk about listening to cassette tapes overnight and waking up fluent, or sleeping with a textbook under your pillow. So is it really possible to learn a new language while you sleep? The answer is actually yes, but as is becoming a theme on my channel, not in the way you think. Yet again, technically correct, but in the least obvious way. Although, honestly, when I started to do the research for this video, I thought I knew what I was going to say, and I had to throw it all out the window because of a handful of astounding scientific studies that genuinely shocked me. So in this video, I'm going to talk about language learning while you slumber. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm a language lover and avid language learner. I make it my goal here to plunder the ivory tower for forbidden knowledge I can share with all of you. Or, if we're being less dramatic, explain useful or interesting things from linguistics in a way that's clear and practical. So, get a warm glass of milk, snuggle up in your jammies, and put your Ebenezer Scrooge nightcap on. We're taking a trip with Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. This video is not sponsored. In fact, it's brought to you by viewers like you. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so right here with super thanks or head over to Patreon and support the channel at www.patreon.com/languagejones. Mattress Firm, you're missing out. So when I first sat down to make this video, I already had some familiarity with the science on sleep and on learning, and I thought I knew what I was going to say. To be fair, I'm still going to say that part. But I was absolutely shaken by some research that's new to me. I'll talk about what it says a little bit later, and I'll talk about how we can implement the findings practically at the end of the video, so stick around. The first thing to get out of the way is that the only thing putting your Spanish textbook under your pillow at night is going to do for you is give you a crick in your neck. Thinking that a textbook full of printed words will indirectly influence your brain is completely ridiculous, unscientific, magical thinking. At that point, you might as well just say that despite Mercury being in retrograde, you're going to learn Spanish without trying because you're manifesting it real hard using El Secreto. Estúpido. I was going to say that the same is true for listening to language tapes or podcasts or whatever while you sleep, but spoiler alert, there's a twist at the end of this video. It's mostly true, but there's actually weirdly a way that those things can help slightly. I absolutely did not expect this. So let's start with the real and most useful information about language learning and sleep. Not only can you learn a language during sleep, it's actually when you do learn a language. But again, that's technically correct, but not what people mean. Here's what it means. Sleep is known to be important for learning, especially for long-term learning. Tons of research on sleep indicates it's useful for consolidating knowledge. For you learning science nerds, you already know that learning can be divided into encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. That is, how you actually get the language into your brain, then your brain does brain stuff, and later you can remember the thing that you tried to remember. The ECR metaphor feels very much like someone arranging a filing cabinet. I spend a fair amount of time talking about encoding on the channel. That's where all my tips about ensuring you have sound and images, pairing the word you're learning with a colorful image or a memory, making use of fear, sex, violence, or other high valence, high arousal, hindbrain kind of stuff works. That's where using numbers and mnemonics works. We're more likely to remember a list of 10 words than just a bunch of words of no particular length. We're more likely to remember something we've spent the time making the neural connections a mnemonic creates, even if mnemonics are, objectively, stupid. Combining all that is how you get my penchant for what I call naughty mnemonics. That's why I barely remember any Persian, except that the word for trousers is shalvor. Memory palaces or other methods of tapping into spatial memory work, hence why I prefer textbooks in physical format rather than an endless scroll on an app. I can remember where a word was on a page and where the page was in the book. But encoding is only one piece of the puzzle. Obviously, we encode because we want to retrieve, but we experience a lot of information during the day. And during sleep, our brains consolidate things and start to work the important stuff we wanted to encode into memory, and even long-term memory, while pruning the rest. So I was initially just going to talk about all the cool parts about how sleep does this. Some of the studies on this are totally mind-blowing in their own right. But again, there's an absolutely crazy plot twist coming later. For a long time, it was thought that sleep basically allows us to shut off all the new information coming in and just consolidate or delete memories. And there's a lot of evidence for this, including specifically in language learning. The general evidence is just that people are better at remembering things when they get to learn them and then sleep. Lots of studies do this with a 90-minute nap. Others have a full night of sleep. Regardless, it seems that when we have some slow waves and some non-REM sleep, we do better on tests of recall of new material than when we don't sleep. Although there are a few studies that suggest that quiet time in a dark room, even if you're not asleep, helps. So downtime for the brain. Sleep just does this more. The thalamus seems to block incoming information with brain waves that I won't pretend to understand, in a process referred to in the academic literature as thalamic gating. So many good band names in this video. If you learn words in the morning and you test in the evening, you don't do as well as if you learn in the evening and test in the morning, provided you had a night of sleep. All-nighter, less effective. So for all the college kids out there, if you're cramming for an exam, make sure you get some sleep too. It is more effective. The research here that blows my mind is that there are a handful of studies showing implicit learning, meaning we learn stuff we weren't paying full attention to and we're not consciously aware of. There's what's called the Dease-Roger-McDermott paradigm, which, confusingly, is not a classic rock band from the 1970s. It's a thing from cognitive psychology where basically I can prime a word I never said and implant a false memory. So in a classic DRM study, I might give you the list of words bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, wake, snooze, blanket, doze, slumber, snore, nap, peace, yawn, and drowsy. This is probably how you deactivate the Winter Soldier too. But when you ask people later, they'll say that I said the word sleep. It wasn't in the list, but all the words relate to it. Here's the kicker. We do this better after sleeping. Like, the brain not only remembers the list of words better, but finds the missing connection between them when strengthening the whole network. As an aside, there's also studies that show that rats made to run a maze have neuron activation in the same patterns during sleep as when they ran the maze, and that there's other studies that basically all indicate that rats and humans seem to replay things in their brains while asleep, but we do it at like 10 to 20 times the speed of real life. So Inception was basically a documentary. It's not just false memories in our native language, though. That would be useless. There's one experiment where researchers taught participants 4 new words to replace the English word the. They were nearby inanimate and inanimate, far away and far away and inanimate. But the researchers only told people they indicated nearby and far away. Some participants figured out the animacy thing on their own. Others didn't. Regardless whether they consciously figured it out, the participants that had a 90-minute nap did better on correct pattern matching. Not only that, but when they were shown an incongruous pairing, say the word that goes with nearby animate nouns, but it was with an inanimate noun, their brainwaves indicated surprisal. They didn't know they knew the rule, but they consolidated an intuitive feel for what was right during sleep. If you're team crashing and you just want to get as much comprehensible input at a level of desirable difficulty as possible, then you should really be supercharging this with high quality sleep. It seems like our brains work out what's going on in all that input while we slumber. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have a video about Stephen Krashen and the hugely popular trend in language self-study he started. So the takeaways up to this point are that sleep allows us to block the nonstop flow of incoming information and consolidate memories. And the really cool part is that we might be making unconscious connections that help us get a feel for our target language, even if we can't consciously articulate what exactly we've learned. Grammatical learning happens during sleep. Memory consolidation happens during sleep. We're better at recalling words we learned after sleep than before, and the effects seem to be cumulative. So if you're doing good encoding routines and active recall, say with Anki or just with frequent engagement with your target language, you're going to learn more, better, and faster with more high-quality sleep because you consolidate what you learn and speed up recall. Therefore, technically, you do learn a language in your sleep. You just have to study the language while you're awake, which makes sleep learning technically correct, but mostly useless. Instead of a magic bullet, it's just an additional thing you have to worry about. Am I getting enough rest to learn as effectively as possible? And that was where I was originally going to end the video, but there's some new research that really messed me up. I have no idea how to practically implement this information, but it is certainly possible. So let's get into it. Oh, and If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment for the algorithm. Let me know your favorite tips for good sleep hygiene. How do you get a good night's sleep? Okay, so I don't even know how to approach this. Remember how I said that thalamic gating basically shuts our brains down so we don't keep processing new information? Quiet rest is good, actual sleep is better? Well, it's not that simple. We're sensitive to changes in our environment when we sleep. So, for instance, when the AC cycle's on and off and I hear it, and sometimes it pulls me out of sleep a little bit. Experimentally, we see this when you vary tones played when people sleep. So if I go, and then I change it at some point to, you're going to notice it. Also, we're sensitive to hearing our own name more than other people's names. And we're even more sensitive to it if the voice sounds angry. We might not even wake up for any of these, but it shows up in our brain waves and in brain scans. So we're actually processing some information while we sleep. Some researchers refer to this as a sort of sentinel mode. Here's where it gets trippy, like the Deese Roger McDermott Paradigm's debut album. It would appear that memory consolidation can be sped along by TMR, targeted memory reactivation. Providing people with memory cues while they sleep actually seems to improve their performance on recall tests later, above and beyond the benefit of sleep alone. You know how Marcel Proust wrote the longest novel ever because he had a flood of memories from smelling a Madeleine, a little cookie? You know, right? Proust, longest novel ever, until J.K. Rowling wrote a children's book that was longer. Still longest actual literary novel for adults. Yeah? Anyway, that scent thing is a real thing. If you give people lists of words to memorize in a room that smells like, say, roses, and then let them sleep and test them on the words, they all do better than the people who did the same thing with no sleep. No surprise there. But if you fill the room they're sleeping in with the scent of roses, they do even better than the ones who sleep in a room that smells like farts or whatever. Would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? Probably. But if you smell roses as you're learning the word vradim, and then smell roses in your sleep, you'll do better on remembering the word vradim. If that's not wild enough, there's more. A group of German researchers have done a handful of studies all trying to get at whether cueing for targeted memory retrieval works with linguistic cues, and their findings are literally shocking, at least to me. They gave people a list of words in Dutch to learn. As expected, when you go to sleep between encoding and retrieval, you perform better. No surprises there. But when sleeping participants were exposed to Dutch words they had studied while asleep, there was a robust effect where those participants performed better on recall tests, including where they had to provide the word after being given the definition. They did better on the words that were cued, and they did better than the control group with no cueing. In studies where the target language word was paired with the translation in the first language, there was no improvement. And in other studies, if I'm reading this all correctly, they found that if you do both, it's better if there's a break between the target word and translation than if they immediately follow one another. Your brain processes it. It would appear that if you're learning, say, Persian, not only will you learn better if you sleep, no surprise there, but you could potentially do even better if you were exposed to saffron and rosewater and mint tea while you study, and then hear the Persian words you studied while you sleep with a saffron, rosewater, and mint diffuser in the room or something. Anecdotally, I'll say that I would just listen to podcasts while drifting off, and I felt like I could feel my brain lighting up at words I had already studied versus the soothing flow of words I didn't know in Persian bedtime stories. And every time I visited family in France as a kid, my French got a lot better as the days wore on. And I fell asleep in front of the TV for an afternoon nap, or dozed on the beach, or slept in a bedroom with windows that led out onto the street, and just heard lots of French while sleeping. But feelings aren't facts, and anecdotes aren't data. There's now data that validates those feelings. This stuff absolutely blows my mind. I'm not sure how I'll implement it. Maybe next video will be sponsored by a diffuser brand. But it would appear that if you wanted to study in a scented room and sleep in a scented room and do nothing else around that scent, and if you wanted to play target language audio while you sleep, at a minimum, it looks like it couldn't hurt, and there's limited evidence that it might help, especially if the language audio is stuff that you've already studied. Similarly, studying closer to sleep might have a modest beneficial impact compared to studying in the morning and going about a full day of experiencing other stuff before you get any rest. So, can you learn a language while you sleep? Yes, you do. And you can actually do things to make that learning even better. But of course, you still have to study while you're awake. There's no evidence for any impact of language training while you slumber. That is, you can evidently supercharge your consolidation, but the encoding has to be done while you're awake. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and leave me that comment. If you don't have a sleep time routine, just leave me a snoozy emoji. And be sure to check out all my other videos. We have fun here. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so right here through Super Thanks or over on Patreon at Language Jones. Until next time, happy learning and sweet dreams.